So you ever notice how there's a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, my dirt bike will do fucking 200 mile an hour in fifth gear, or fucking second gear does 100 mile an hour, you know, I got a little fucking 50, and that fucking thing will do 120 in first gear. I'm here to tell you that this fucking bike, which is a 1986 Honda CR500, do fucking 540 mile an hour. I'm going to show you how that is. But first, I'll show you something else. Just got this today. You saw my my old side cover was rotted out. So, got a brand new one. It's my brand new side cover. Replaced the old one because the water pump was rotted out. But I'm not going to put this on because my dirt bike's gonna do 500 mile an hour. And I'm gonna show you how. I'm gonna take this tire and I'm gonna hook it up directly to the crank. My dirt bike does 500 mile an hour. First of all, let's calculate the distance a tire moves in a revolution. So 26.5 inches diameter tire multiplied by pi, that will give me the distance it moves in one revolution in inches per minute. Multiply that by 60. Now we divide this inches by 12 and divide this inches by 5680. And I just did this all in one equation. So I get 0.07 is one revolution per minute. How many miles an hour we go. So let's multiply this by 5,000 RPM and get 366. 7,000 RPM get 512, and 7,500 RPM gets me 500, almost 550 mile an hour. And remember, horsepower is more at the crank than at the rear wheel. So, how come my dirt bike really can't do 500 mile an hour? And that's what we're going to talk about. A tire, when it rotates, exerts a force in this direction on the ground. That force is determined by the amount of torque turning the wheel. Remember in the previous video we said that force times distance is equal to torque? Well, if you have torque rotating this wheel, torque divided by the distance, so torque divided by distance will give you the force exerted onto the ground. That's why a smaller tire is going to give you more torque, more force on the ground, versus a larger tire is going to give you less force on the ground and more speed. So that's why your bike can't do 500 mile an hour at the crank, because even though it has more horsepower, it's got less torque. So the two purposes of the transmission is to regulate the speed from the crank to the rear wheel, and the second is to increase the torque. So as you go through the motor, the torque increases. In the previous video I said if you had 50, based on the hypothetical setup, if you had 50 torque at the crank, you could have 450 at the rear wheel at a 20% loss rate. So 450, let's say that this length here, even if this length here was 0, you still have 450 versus 50 at the crank. So what is the significance of force? So as I said, force is equal to torque divided by length. Force causes acceleration. Acceleration is equal to force divided by mass. So without enough torque, you cannot accelerate. This is why you can't just put higher gearing on just any bike and make it do 200 mile an hour, because you don't have enough torque at the rear wheel then to cause acceleration, because you can't exert enough force on the ground. Even if you put taller gearing in your bike and you are able to move, you may find that perhaps after you switch into third gear or into fifth gear, you may find that after 5,000 RPM your bike doesn't accelerate anymore, or it seems to accelerate really slowly. This is because torque drops off after a certain RPM, and at a certain gear ratio you may have too little torque to move the bike and accelerate anymore, so you may not be able to redline the bike. So what about power? It means nothing? No. Torque and power work together. Force is also a property of power. Force is equal to power divided by velocity. So if you increase your power output, you increase your force. If you've ever tried to start out in fifth gear, it requires a lot of clutch because you do not have enough speed, nor are you in the right RPM range for the gear. Even if you shift early into a higher gear, notice how slow your acceleration is? You need to shift to maximize your power as well as have enough torque to accelerate. So if your gearing is really high, you may not be generating enough torque to increase your speed and maximize your power output. So in a nutshell, that's why your bike can't do 500 mile an hour. And that's why certain bikes, if you just gear them to do 100 mile an hour or 120, they're not going to do it. At least not without also modifying the engine for higher performance to increase the torque output. Please note, I'm not a physicist or anything like that either, so this is a very, very basic introduction. So this is roughly what the idea is. Even if I may have skipped over some minor details or not gotten everything completely 100% accurate.